Good evening, everybody. Welcome along to Steve Wraith's live Q&A. Tuned in now because we're in a little break with the football. I think a lot of you will probably be watching it. Newcastle winning yesterday, of course, 5-1. But Liverpool and Arsenal just played out a fantastic game there, like 3-2 to Arsenal. Saka with a penalty to win the game, but fantastic that. Manchester United versus Everton. I can just see David Cook commenting. It's on BT Sports, mate. So if you want to catch it, you can see it. As always, this is a 1 hour chat where we can talk about anything. Football, the true crime world, what's going on in the world. Anything you want to talk about, we can talk about it tonight. I can't promise I'll always answer every question, but always happy to use this show whenever I do it to have a bit crack about anything you want to talk about. Films, books, you name it. We can talk about it. Doesn't have to directly involve me either. If you want to talk about something that you've watched or you've read or you've seen, give us a shout and that's what we can do. Stephen Kennedy, no problem, mate. He says, I'll have to watch this later tonight, but anyone know how our ex or on low players are doing? Not heard anything about Gale, for example, or has he got a sick note in again? Best thing for you to do, mate, is to go on to NUFC.com. And if you go on to NUFC.com, which has always been brilliant for letting you know what is happening with our loanees or players who've gone out, for loan, whatever. It's all on there now. It doesn't go on every day. It usually goes on after the weekend fixtures are finished. So keep popping onto there and you will see something at some point about players who've been loaned out. The current one at the moment, Jeff Hendrick at Reading is on there. Unhappy return to Loftus Road for Hendrick. Completed 90 minutes though, but they lost 2-1. Dan Langley, he's at Gateshead. Obviously 1-1 draw for them. Martin Dubravka, well, he's not playing again today. Rodrigo Vilca, he played a match today. It hasn't been played yet. And then you've got Garang Kual. He didn't play at the weekend. Matty Longstaff. Matty watched, so he didn't play. Callum Watts didn't play either. Neither did Lucas de Boer, who's at Hamilton Academical. Kieran Clark at Sheffield United is unavailable due to injury. Isaac Hayden at Norwich City, currently unavailable due to injury. And that's it, yeah. And obviously Cole's not on loan because we all actually signed him. He just can't play for Newcastle at this present time. But NUFC.com, that answers your question. That is the place to go, mate. Okay, Tom Dixon. How dare you miss a show this morning, mate? I read your thing on Twitter. Yeah, you were hungover. Unbelievable, but brilliant win yesterday. He says, let's go and beat Man United next Sunday. Big game, that. Massive game, really. I think yesterday winning, back-to-back games was important. And for us, obviously puts us into 5th place. I think next weekend is going to give us a bit of a test of where we're actually at. Because Man United aren't the Man United of 10 years ago. Newcastle shouldn't be worried about going there. It would be very, very interesting. It really will be. But yeah, hey, why not? And I think Stu Penman on the Professionals this morning talked a little bit about the odds, and I think the odds are fantastic for Newcastle to go down there and win 3-1. They've come right in back to where they were, last season and previous seasons. Official topic talk. How are you, Steve? Was that a recent wedding? If it was, congratulations. I did see the photographs on social media. If that's you getting married, mate, congratulations. I'm not sure if it was your anniversary or something, but I couldn't really make out what it was, but it seemed to be a lot of photographs of you walking down the aisle. And already covered that one from you, David. Yeah, it is on TV, BT Sports. I'm just watching it now. And Barry, good evening. Steve, I know we're looking at this from a different position now, but would you accept us joining the Super League if it was offered? The money incentives must be huge and the Saudis may be tempted. Absolutely not, mate. Completely against the Super League. I'd be very surprised if the new owners even contemplated that at this moment in time, and completely against it, mate. I couldn't see it happening. I certainly can't see it happening anytime soon, but I'm just completely against it, Barry. I really am, from a football fan's perspective. it would just kill everything. Let Newcastle focus on domestic trophies, competing for the Premier League, and getting into the Europa or the Champions League. That's what we want. Super League, it's not for me, mate. Not at all. Don, good evening. I hope you're well, mate. Thanks for all your contributions on the old NUFC Matters shows. Obviously, you're making some great points as well in recent weeks. Mr. Sifter, good to see you, mate, and glad you could join us. I know you enjoy these shows. You also enjoy News of the World. It's back this week. Me, Lee, and Anne will be linking up again. So it'll be good to hear your views. I think that's Wednesday night, 7:15. David Cook, I saw an old interview with Douglas Gold talking about us and Super League back then. I haven't seen that, David. Maybe stick a link somewhere for us to have a look at that, mate. That would be good. Julie, yes, it was great to see you too. Didn't have much time to speak to you. It was one of those where I got hooked up with different conversations. We had a really good night at the Irish Centre on Friday night to celebrate the anniversary of the takeover. It was great to catch up with so many people who I've met, like to Julie and so many other people. But it was great to catch up with a few new faces, and there was a couple of people from Ireland, a couple of people from Australia who were coming over for the game and made a big weekend of it. So it was great to catch up with so many people. But as always, good to catch up with you, Jules, and your better half, and to meet Thomas as well, who you introduced us to. It was great. So absolutely fantastic. Really, really good. You meant our match against Manchester United? Yeah, it's a strange one that day because it's a big, big game. You would have thought it would have been covered somewhere, but no, it's not. And maybe that's down to Manchester United underperforming rather than Newcastle United playing well. But yeah, it's a strange one, that, mate. Really strange. El Stapleton, I hope you're well, mate. Thanks for your comments. And people tend to use the live chat to get their views across, but I've noticed you and a couple of others now starting to drop into the comments on videos, and yeah, I'm all up for that. It's not something I've really ever paid much attention to, the comments. I'll see them and don't reply, but I'm gonna get people to, if you've got a point you want to make after the show, maybe drop it in there and we can use it if you miss a show to stick your comments up on the channel as well. But might be worth people doing that. Top Bobby, good evening. Did anyone ever go to the Windmill in Cowgate or the Independent in Elsick? Neither of those bars for me. Never been in either of those bars, Top Bobby. I was obviously a Gateshead lad, but to be honest, it's one I'd be interested to see what people have got to say. Has anybody ever been in those places? John, good evening, mate. Glad to see the John Anderson talking went well. I will forget this, John. So when you're recording it, it must be loud in there. So I think it was El Stapleton actually made the point that it was quite loud, the background noise. Not sure if you can do anything about that. So there's a little note for you, mate, with your recording skills on your phone. Good evening, Paul Gallant. Thanks very much for sharing. Again, I saw you'd shared it on social media, etc. Fantastic, mate. Gale played for Stoke yesterday. Yeah, we won't get any updates on Gale because he's left the club. So you won't get any updates on him. He's finally left Newcastle. It's the likes of Hendrick, Gale, Kieran Clark are out on loan, but two of those contracts are up at the end of the season, mate. So again, those loan deals are at the end of the season, and then they'll need to find new clubs. Stephen Armstrong, good evening. I hope you're well, mate. He says, how do you think Paqueta is doing so far? Well, obviously, as a Newcastle fan, I haven't really, watched many of West Ham's games, but I caught a little bit on social media over the last couple of games. He seems to be really linking up well with Scamacca. There was a lovely ball he put through today, which I've only seen on Twitter, but he really seems to have linked up well with him down there. I mean, look, Paqueta's clearly a baller. He's an international for Brazil, played, I think it's over 33 caps now, maybe for Brazil. But he's a cracking player. And he just seems to have fitted in well. Clearly not a goal scorer, whereas Bruno clearly is. And I personally think we got the best deal. We're talking about this on the way up to the ground yesterday, actually, about Bruno, and was Paqueta really somebody that we were looking at any point? And the answer to that is yes, but whilst we were looking at Paqueta, Bruno came onto Newcastle's radar, and I personally think we got the better deal. I think we got a player cheaper. I mean, he's a bargain player. When you look at the price we paid, and you look at what he's probably worth now, it's incredible. And Bruno is just such a canny lad, as we would say up here. Plays some great stuff. He turns negatives into positives. And he just does things that no other player can do. And I think the rest of the team clearly appreciate him. And when he's not playing, we really, really do miss him. Ryan Sweeney, good evening. I hope you're well, mate. I hope the recovery is going well, mate. You've been laid up for a while and you were amiss in the chat. So good to see you back on again. Barry says that Gale has played 12 games for Stoke and hasn't scored yet. Yeah, I mean, that doesn't surprise me. He was on the crest of a slump when he was at Newcastle at the back end and couldn't even get in the team. So, yeah, but playing at a lower level, it's a bit surprising to hear that he's not scoring. Good to hear that you're doing better anyway, Ryan. Fantastic, mate. Good stuff. Don't forget, this is your chance to ask me any questions you want to ask. So get them in, and I'll be on till about 7:30. Doug All says, hi all, where are we going to buy another Bruno to take us to the next level? I think with the people we've got behind the scenes, Ashworth and Eels, those guys are, clearly very good at building things on and off pitch. And I think we'll find a few. Who's to say that amongst all the youngsters that were brought in the summer, that we haven't found another gem? I mean, Garan Kual is being lavished with praise already by people up and down the country, and he's highly thought of in his home country. So for me personally, maybe we've already unearthed that next gem, Doug. But if you're talking about somebody who can come straight into the team, I think the crack amongst Newcastle fans on social media is Maddison. I mean, Maddison would be the perfect sign, and if Newcastle can pull that off and get him in January, that takes Newcastle to the next level. Doug obviously has to come in. He has to fit into the team. He has to fit into the the formation that the Howe wants to play. But absolutely fantastic, mate, if we can get somebody like that. But believe you me, Doug, these owners will find the next one. Tom Dixon says that banner from War Flags was great yesterday, and now TalkSport are furious about it. Now, Tom, I don't think they are, because I've seen Jim White and TalkSport both tweet about it, and they both put messages out complimenting Newcastle fans for the banner. For those of you who didn't see it, was obviously a big flag about the takeover, but along the bottom there was a flag which didn't quite get unfurled out properly, and it basically just said this takeover is as dead as a dead dodo, which was obviously that infamous quote that was given on TalkSport. So yeah, I've seen Jim White and I've seen the TalkSport official Twitter account both praise it, praise Newcastle fans, saying fair play to them. So I'm not sure why you've seen that, Tom, but I think you're wrong. Anyway, regarding the Super League, I think our owners are too in tune with fans and the essence of football to fall into that trap. Yeah, I would agree with you. I just, I just don't think that they will come in with that intention at all. And I just can't see the Super League getting pushed through. I really can't. Can I see another European format coming through? Something better than the Champions League at some point? Probably. But your bread and butter will always be the league. I just don't see a Super League ever being something that anybody would stand for, You can't expect supporters to be flying to different countries for every game, and it's ludicrous, and it would get boring. It would be so boring. It just wouldn't be. Wouldn't be football as we know it. Not for me. Definitely not El Staples, and I'd be very surprised if it happens. Barry says, Steve, true crime wise, I'm fascinated with all the theories behind Jack the Ripper. Have you ever thought about doing one? Not really my bag, that, Barry. And I'll tell you why. It's the whole serial killers thing. It sickens me. And I mean, murder's murder, and it's wrong. Anyone who takes another person's life, well, they'll be judged when they die. But for me, it's life for a life. And you know, if there was people that caught and put away, that they should serve the life tariff. And the theories behind Jack the Ripper, etc. Although I find it interesting, I've watched documentaries like you probably have about Jack the Ripper. It's not something that's ever really, you know, I've never seen the fascination with it. And the injuries and the, you know, what this person did to the women was disgusting. It's something which I just don't like. Even the dramas, like the Dharma thing. I mean, I've watched that, and it turned me stomach the first 3 episodes. I've got to be perfectly honest. I sleep quite well, but watching those Dharma episodes, the first 3, and I'm not sure if any of you guys or girls have watched it, but it was just churns your stomach. It really does. I was left feeling uneasy. In fact, I had to start watching the rest of it during the day because it just left you on edge on the night time. But Jack the Ripper, yeah. I mean, look, there's so many series, and I've watched so many documentaries. One of my true crime podcasts, which is still on this channel, if you search Steve Wraith interviews Jack the Ripper expert, you'll find it. And that guy's like one of these tour guides, and he's written books, etc. He's got some amazing theories on it. So yeah, I mean, in that respect, yeah, I've got an interest in it. Would I ever think about doing one? No. Alan Robson, he of Night Owls fame, did one. He did a great radio show about Jack the Ripper as well, and you know, he thought he'd solved the case, but hasn't everybody solved the case? Hasn't everybody who's done a book about Jack the Ripper said it's him, it's her, it's, you know, it's this guy from this country, it's this guy from that country? I mean, it's like the Loch Ness monster, isn't it? It's always going to interest people. It's always going to have a different angle. So for me, not for me, mate. I would never consider doing any books on that. And to be honest, you know, the true crime side of things, I've written every book I wanted to write. You know, I've put pen to paper on the books I wanted to do, and some that I didn't really want to do. The website, if anybody wants to look at the books that I've written, is there, www.badboysbooks.net. Get yourself onto there. Some Christmas ideas for anybody who's interested in true crime as well. So, you know, have a look on there. There's, you know, all of my titles. But yeah, it's not something I've ever had a craving to write about. I've had a lot of interest in the Yorkshire Ripper, but again, I wouldn't ever consider doing a book or a documentary about them. And again, I just couldn't understand that guy. But I think my interest in the Yorkshire Ripper was probably A, because it was in this country, but because B, I lived through it. You know, my childhood was you know, those horrendous murders were something which didn't happen too often, thank God. And you would watch the news, you would see it, you would see the advertising boards when, you know, when the hoax call was made, and it was just, it's just something you grew up with. So I think probably more interest in the British cases. But I couldn't read a book about the Ripper. I couldn't read a book about Hindley and Brady. I couldn't read a book about Rose and Fred West. I couldn't do it. It's not my bag. Dennis Nielsen, another one. I've done podcasts with. I did a podcast, again, a true crime podcast on here, with Dennis Nielsen's closest friend when he was in prison, and I found it bizarre. And I know that sounds hypocritical coming from somebody who visited the Crays and who has got to know a lot of well-known criminals over the years and done books with some of them. But you know, for me, you know, crime full stop is wrong, but at the same time, I've got no interest in those kind of crimes, like serial killers, etc. And I just couldn't read the books. I just genuinely couldn't. It sickens us. It really does. Good evening, Kevin. I hope you're well now that the hurricane has passed over. That is great. And good to see that you've survived. Do you think Eddie's talk with KK is paying off? Yes, Steve. I mean, we know that he's spoken to Keegan, but we don't really know what about. So has it helped him? Probably has, because, you know, I've been looking at meet Kevin on more than one occasion, and you know, Kevin does have, you know, opinions and valid opinions about Newcastle, and he'd certainly, if there's anybody who can give you an honest opinion of how you should conduct yourself and do this, that, and the other at Newcastle United Football Club, then Keegan's the man to listen to. So yeah, Steve, whatever he said to him will be positive. And I'm sure Eddie will have taken out of it what he wants to take out of it. We're getting some great traffic from America. Chris from Arizona, good evening or good afternoon to you. I hope things are well out there, and thank you for tuning in. Something a little bit different this one. If you haven't already heard this show, but I obviously just take questions from anybody in the chat. Anybody wants to know anything, anybody's got any conversations they want to start, go for it. It's your night tonight to have a one-on-one with me. I believe from the start of the season, we finished in the top 4, going off last season's form. What do you reckon, says Dave Carmichael. You know what, Dave? I didn't think would be anywhere near these positions so early on. Do I think there's going to be a bump in the road at some point? Possibly. We've had a bump in the road over the last few weeks with the injuries that we've had. All of our flair players out at the same time, the likes of ASM and Bruno and Wilson. We've got massive options at the back. And have we had our bump in the road and we're now going to hit a bit of form, Dave? I just don't know. I mean, it's quite exciting to think that people are even thinking about finishing in the top 4. To not be involved in a relegation battle, Dave, is fantastic for me. And I'm sure it's fantastic for everybody as well. But I think if you're going to ask us if I'm going to change my prediction from the start of the season, I think we could end up in the top 7. Genuinely think we could finish top 7. Do I think we could finish top 4? No. But I think next week, Man United, Newcastle United will tell us a lot about where we could finish. If we can go to Old Trafford and get a point or get 3 points, which is something we don't do, those European places might just be within sight. So yeah, Dave, it's interesting, but I think we'll finish higher than I predicted. Was great on Friday, John. Yeah, it was fantastic. Good to see you there. Some money raised for the food bank as well, which is fantastic. And we managed to do the Mr. Vicky's sauce challenge, which we'll be sharing those videos on Friday. Me, Steve Hasty, and Steve Wilkinson did it. With varying grimaces on faces, I have to add, but it was great. But yeah, it was a great night. Thanks for that, Paul. Good of you to do that. 5th in the league, guys. Certainly nice to see pundits see we were right for a change. As Ryan, yeah, I saw Miguel Delaney squirming on TV as well on one of these panels on Sky. Clearly, he doesn't like talking about it. Still, a lot of people and journalists and TV reporters and commentators still going on about the Saudi issue, sport washing. Newcastle fans should hang their heads in shame. Blah 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 blah. Can you not just understand? All we're bothered about is the football. And you can say it till you're green and white in the face. It's not going to bother us. So crack on. That's all I'm going to say on that matter. Thanks for Keith's speech on Friday night, whoever shared it. Pure class. Yeah, Jingo recorded it. We didn't even plan to do speeches, Don, to be honest. And Steve Hasty came up and said, do you fancy getting up on stage and saying a few words? By the time it was like 9 o'clock, 8:30, I said, I don't think we need to do it, But I says, if anybody's going to do it, get Keith up. And Keith, of course, doesn't need 2 invites, and away he went. So, yeah, it was a guy called Jingo who recorded it. And big thanks to him and his son. It was nice to meet his son. And he recorded it, and it was a cracking speech. So, yeah, he sent it to me, and I managed to get it up on the channel. So, at least it gave a bit more of an insight into how the takeover went through from our perspective. David Cook says the irony of Super League, totally anti-competitive when it was anti-competitive that helped our takeover. Very good point, that. Very good point indeed, mate. But yeah, it's not. I can't see that happening for any, for any time in the near future. I can't see that happening. Paul says he's been in the windmill. I'm not sure. I can't remember who asked that question before, but yeah, he's been in the windmill. John says, I once put some beer pumps on the bar in the windmill for the brewery. It was an interesting place. Oh, God, it's 2 people who've been in the windmill. Oh, you meet and Paul, great stuff. You met Keith for the first time. Yeah, he's a good guy, Keith. Ryan says, bring in Madison in January. It could be a pretty quick European trip. I genuinely feel that Newcastle sitting within touching distance or in the European places by the time the transfer window comes around in January will dictate who we'll bring in. If Newcastle are sitting 12th, then ultimately you're going to be in a position where players are going to look higher up the table. But if you're sitting 5th to 8th, the likes of Madison or whoever are going to look at it and go, you know what? Might be worth going there and joining that project. And it'll all come down to those conversations with Eddie Howe. And the one thing we've heard from all of these people who've come to Newcastle United is how impressed they were with Eddie Howe when they came to meet him. So I genuinely think that we will bring in a big name player. And I think Newcastle will be there or thereabouts within touching distance of European places. And yeah, I think that's where we'll be. I'm just laughing as well. Everton are now doing flags. They've got a big flag at the ground. Unbelievable how many people are now suddenly doing flags at games. And I know Newcastle weren't the first people to do it. Liverpool's always been great for scarves and flags, etc. But you know, since Newcastle started putting the effort in, everybody else seems to be putting the effort in as well. Stuart Rowley says, Wingnut, how's your lugs? And my lugs burning like Stuart. And that's it. I've not been called Wingnut for a long time, unless you're not talking to me. Still loved listening to Gibbo and Ando. Just hard to hear at times, says L. Stapleton. Right. So that was you. I thought it was you who mentioned that, mate. Yeah. I have passed it on to John, so at least you've heard that. How did you meet Mitch, Steve Hasty, and Supermac? Good question. Mitch and Steve Hasty, I got to know just by being Newcastle fans going to the games. For those of you who didn't know, I used to do a football fanzine. I used to sell it outside the ground. So I got to know the lads just by seeing them going past and nodding. And, you know, we didn't have mutual acquaintances or anything, but we probably started becoming really aware of each other when the lads were involved with the Newcastle Supporters Club. And I went along to the Irish Centre to support that. And the Supporters Club then became the Trust. And that was probably when I got to meet Mitch and Steve Hasty. Mitch used to be on a message board called Skunkers. I used to get a bit of stick on there, to be honest. But and I don't think I was Neil's cup of tea at first. And Steve Hasty, yeah, just as I say, I got to know him through protests, through fan protests. That's how we got to know each other. But we became really good pals once they'd left the Trust and set up NUFC Fans United. That was when we really all clicked. And yeah, it's been an interesting time that we spent together. With regards to Supermac, I first met Supermac back in 1995, and that was when I needed somebody to come and do a talk-in for my football team. I ran the football team at the Portland Arms in the Felon, and I needed a guest speaker, and Supermac agreed to come to the Portland to do the presentation for us. And I'd got his number off John Gibson, and he came along and he basically did a little speech and then handed out the trophies to the lads at the end of the season. I also had QFX on the same night at the presentation. Cracking night. That was when I first met Supermac. We then crossed paths with each other on a regular basis on local TV because I was doing the fanzine. I was getting up and giving my opinion on programs like Seat in the Stands on ITV and the Footballers Football Show and stuff like that on Sky. And me and Malcolm's paths crossed on numerous occasions. And then people, he came and did a couple of other presentations for us, and we just kept in touch. And when I started doing talk-ins, football talk-ins, me and Malcolm linked up on a regular basis, and we have done since 1995. So it's been a great friendship, and he's a living legend and a top man. Will Isaac be back for the Man United game? Ask Eddie Howe, Tom. I don't know, but if you watched his press conference on Friday, it's a muscle injury, so it's not going to be too long. So you would imagine that if it's not the game against Man United, it's going to be the game against Everton where he's back. So it's not going to be too long. Favorite Rocky movie, Steve, is definitely Rocky 3. I like them all. I mean, Rocky, the original Rocky, is such a good film because it's the establishment of the character the main characters. You know, I love watching the journeys of the likes of him, of Adrian, of Apollo Creed. I don't know whether you've watched it. A director who I'm working with on a quite a regular basis he sent me a thing that was shot during lockdown, and it's on YouTube, and it's Sylvester Stallone looking at Rocky. I think it's Rocky 3, actually, if I remember rightly. The director's cut, and he's redoing it, and he does this in lockdown, and he's pausing stuff and saying this shouldn't be done, that should be done, that should be changed. Fascinating viewing for somebody who's involved in film like myself. But yeah, Rocky 3, absolutely brilliant. So many great characters, but I love them all. Even Creed, not great, but you watch them, don't you? It's one. They're those kind of films. If you're sitting in a house, you get back in after you've had a night out, your lass has gone to bed, you're flicking through the channels, and then you suddenly see Rocky started at 10:30. It's now 11:30. You still stick it on, and you find yourself still sitting up till 2:00 watching the end, and you know, enjoying it just as much as you did the last time. And I'm like that with a few films. Jaws is probably one of my favorite films. The Godfather 2, another one. Goodfellas, The Craze 1990. All of those kind of films. Star Wars, the original Star Wars. There's a couple of James Bond ones, Octopussy, and Goldfinger. Just different films that you know, if you see them, you put them on. Christmas is a nightmare for that. I'm one of these people who just sits and presses the red button, records, you know, all of these things, and you sometimes get around to watching some of them, but never watch all of them. But yeah, great question. John says, I think the don't change a winning team thing might not apply for our next game. Do you agree? You're asking the wrong person. Roger, who is one of the moderators, said to me yesterday, unchanged team today, Steve, unchanged team. I was certain he was going to change it. I thought he was going to change and bring Target in and bring ASM in, but it was unchanged. Do I agree it might not apply for the next game? We've just won 4-1 and 5-1. You'd imagine he's going to change it. You really would, but don't change a winning team, I guess, John. You're going to Old Trafford. It's a really hard one. I would imagine he would start ASM, and he would start ASM and he would bring Target in for the Man United game. But he may well just reward the players for what they've done. It's going to be an interesting one. It's a great question, but it's one I cannot really answer with any. I can't give you a definite answer. I think he'll change it, but then why would you change a winning team? It's a one you cannot really answer. Ryan Sweeney says, for the first time, I felt for the other team after ASM came on, after thrashing them. It reminded me of Aguero coming on 90 minutes with 4-0 down at City. I know what you mean, mate. It was great, wasn't it? Having strength and depth for the first time in a long time. It was absolutely brilliant to see Bruno going off and ASM coming on. And I guess that's something we need to get used to, because we will be bringing other players in. And you know, it's a nice feeling to have. The feeling I had, Ryan, was sitting there at 2-0 when Tony stroked the penalty in to make it 2-1, thinking, well, we're just going to go up the other end and score again. And that was it. We did. And I haven't felt like that since the days of, you know, the Entertainers and Bobby Robson. Good evening, Rachel. I hope the play is going well. It was good to see that photograph with you and Steve Hasty, which will be shown on Friday night's show in lookalikes. Brilliant. L. Stapleton says, regarding Paqueta, Olivia Bernard said he was Bruno with goals. Watched him a lot. I think he hasn't been managed as well as Bruno was. He needs more time on the ball. That Premier League allows, but will come good. Everton 1, Manchester United 0. Missed the goal, but yeah, Everton 1 up. We are the next level and growing. You are right, Paul. But yeah, getting back to you, L. Stapleton, on that point. David Moyes doesn't strike me as one of those players who's particularly, you know, creative and attacking. And, you know, I just think, you know, maybe he doesn't know how to handle a flair player such as Paqueta. But he's certainly doing the business. That was a great goal by Everton, by the way. It was Iwobi who scored it, curling right foot into the far corner of the net, past De Gea. Nothing you can do about that, to be fair. Wonderful goal, great strike, 1-11. John says the title looks like a 2-horse race now. It's either the Etihad or St James's. John, I wish I had your optimism, mate. It's not going to Anfield, that's for certain. It's going to Arsenal or Man City, and Arsenal look absolutely fantastic in the minute, mate. Absolutely fantastic. Clubhouse says, me and Warlass sang "I the Tiger" 38 times on karaoke last night. We are going through a rocky stage. Excellent. Barry says, stories going around that we're targeting young players in South America. Is this the way forward, Steve? Which countries would you target? Look, we haven't gone far wrong with South America, have we? Bruno, Miguel Miron. When you look in the past, and Fumaca, etc., Gavilan, we've picked some bad players in the past, but we seem to be getting it right now. I don't think it comes down to picking specific countries. I think it's just looking at the various academies in places and targeting those places, building up the relationships as well, and look at the homegrown players, Barry, as well. Build up those links with Wallsend Boys Club, with Red Youth, because there's a hell of a lot of local talent. You don't always have to fly somebody in from South America when there's somebody in Baker or Gateshead who could just do the job for you as well. And I think it's the beauty of seeing the likes of Sean Longstaff and Elliot Anderson, being part of this setup at the minute. It doesn't always have to be big foreign countries and big foreign players who are done in the black and white shirt. It does you proud when you're seeing a Geordie doing it. So yeah, that would be my view on that anyway, mate. Tonight we sit in 5th. It's a hell of achievement this close to the World Cup, says Paul. Paul, it's a hell of a lot better than where we were last week, mate. Did you get my email via John for my first 2-match, Steve? David, I did. Thank you very much, mate. And it will be featured on Wednesday night show. James says, I've said it on the chat before, but 2 upgrades in the winter and 2 in the summer will frighten the hell out of the big 6. James, you're right, mate. And Newcastle have got the money to do that, and they will do it. Ultimately, mate, it's exciting times being a Newcastle fan. I think Maddison is Eddie Howe's type of player. Me too, Chris. I really do know that just from what I've heard from certain players who've already experienced working under Eddie Howe, that people are automatically listening to what he says, to respect him, and ultimately Maddison will come in and love the atmosphere in the dressing room. It's got all the hallmarks of a team that's going to win something very soon. And if I had to put money on it now, I'd say, depending on the draw, Newcastle's got a great chance of getting to Wembley this year with this team. They really have. They've got the bit between their teeth, got the camaraderie, they've got the skill. They need a bit of luck with injuries, a little bit of luck with a draw, and I don't see why they couldn't get to the final of the Carabao or the FA Cup. I definitely think that will happen. Mr. Sifter says, love these Q&As, Steve. What do you think you'd probably be up to these days if you hadn't found that book, That Fateful Day Down the Quayside? Yeah, it's a great question. That the craze book that I bought, which obviously led to us doing passing my exam and then writing to the craze. It was a life-changing moment, which some people fully understand and other people can't understand. But I'd like to think I'd have still been acting, Mr. Sifter, and maybe I would have just continued on that road until I made it. But as my life did change with the buying the craze book, then I'm happy with my lot. And I've said this many times: if I die tomorrow, I've actually done more or less everything I wanted to do. The way I look at it, my life now, the only thing I'd like to do now is to walk my kids down the aisle and to see my grandkids, and those are the two lifetime achievements left for those boxes to be ticked. If I can do that, I'll die a happy man. But nothing, you can't take life for granted. You can't take anything for granted. And when your time's up, your life is mapped out for me. I just don't think that. I think you can change the course of your life. I think we're allowed that. Because we can change the course of our life with life decisions. But I think ultimately it is all still mapped out. I've just always felt like that. I really have. But yeah, I think writing to the craze changed my life in a positive way, and I just don't regret it at all. And yeah, I've had a lot of stick for it. I've had a lot of criticism for it, but at the same time, the video the documentary that's on Amazon, the craze gangsters behind bars that I did during lockdown. I've had more praise for that than anything else because the message is quite clear. Don't get involved in crime. Crime leads to one place, and it leads to misery. Don't get involved in it. And being able to get that message out to youngsters is, for me, very important, especially with what we've seen happening in Liverpool with that young girl being shot dead, and in the northeast in Gateshead only last week. A young, promising young footballer, 14 years of age, killed. And at this moment in time, another youngster who is younger in custody for that particular crime. It's the message should be loud and clear to kids: don't get involved in crime. Yeah, but great question. Yeah, and it's one again which you can't really you can't really answer with a definite answer. But I hope I've given you a bit of an insight into how I feel about it. And I'm lucky enough that I met John Pearson, who wrote that book, and I think he was more disturbed about the fact that I was interested enough to write to the craze after reading his book than anything else. And I think he got that a lot of times. I think he almost felt a bit, he passed away earlier this year, but I think he also feels a little bit, he felt before he passed away a little bit upset that his book had glamorized the craze too much, Paul, thank you for doing that. You're a very good supporter of the shows, mate, and it's always much appreciated. Thanks for putting that out. In view of the fact that us and City are owned by Arabs, will we both be the future to combine and act as counteraction to the Americanization of our sport? Good question, John. It's not one I can answer directly, but I can see where you're coming from with it. But I just don't understand, why the Premier League would even contemplate allowing all these American owners to come in when you can see quite clearly what they would want to achieve. And I don't think two Arab owners against a load of American owners would make much difference when it comes to a vote, because that's ultimately what it would be. That's what it would be down to, mate, But yeah, interesting. I guess time will tell. Chris Banks says the Dharma series is great bedtime viewing. Dear God, Chris. It's you don't watch it before you go to bed, please. It's not great bedtime viewing. I've seen some horrendous gifs and messages as well. I've watched Dharma, Steve, after you mentioned it. I've watched the documentaries on him since. He is a top level lunatic. Yeah, the only thing that was good about Dharma for me was the happy ending. Everton won, Man United won. Anthony has just equalised. So that's 1-1 for 50 minutes gone. Yeah, I mean, the documentaries are bizarre, and I've never understood this thing in America where they get these people on TV. So like, who in their right mind would have like Peter Sutcliffe before he died, allowing him to do an interview on TV and chatting away about his victims and why he did this and why he did that? Or I mean, we had Dennis Nielsen, I believe it was in the 80s. I think you can watch that on YouTube. But Dennis Nielsen actually being on doing an interview and a chat about his murders. It's just stomach churning. I just don't understand it at all. But he was a next level lunatic, 100%. And for me, watching his interview, again, it's just sickening. Top Bobby says, Steve, meeting some of the people you've met through your true crime research, have you ever worried about your safety? Bobby, it would be a lie to say I haven't at times. There's certain people who I've met who I've got to be honest, who kind of have unnerved us. They do unnerve you. You look at them and you think, I wouldn't want to be in your company for too long. But at the same time, a lot of these people I've met maybe in prison. You're under supervision, you're under the camera glares, and it hasn't really put me off too much. But I've always tried to be fair and give an honest opinion. I've tried not to say anything about particular situations when I don't know the true facts. If people have put facts or paperwork or evidence in front of me, say for a book that I've written, then ultimately I've used it. But what I've also done is, if people have come at a later date and said, well, hold on a minute, what about this? Then I've always turned around and said, well, actually, maybe we should look into this a bit more. And look, at the end of the day, mate, like I said before, when you're in a position, when you're in life, your life is mapped out for you at the end of the day. And I don't think it can change the course of your life. And, you live and die by your decisions, Bobby. Tom Dixon says, Newcastle are now 4 points clear of Liverpool. Yeah, mate, it's interesting, isn't it? Very interesting. How well Newcastle have progressed so far. Question, Steve, when did you begin on YouTube? Paul, you can find that out, I think, when you see about. And to be honest, it's not something I've looked at. If you bear with us, I'll see if I can find it. And it might just be in the about section. There it is. Joined 24th of November 2010. The channel's been up for that length of time, but it used to be a true crime channel. So basically, it was true crime documentaries, which I collected, and I wanted to put them somewhere safe, and somewhere where, if I was away on holiday or on business or on the train, I could sit and watch them, rather than carrying a USB around. And then back in the old days, you could monetize copyrighted videos. YouTube gave you the option to do that. So I had some really good videos up, and I monetized them, and it gave me a little bit of income. But then they changed the community guidelines and basically stopped the monetization of copyrighted material, which is fair enough. And I never did anything with it until COVID and the lockdown hit. And at the time I was doing NUFC Matters chats kind of thing on Instagram. And we were pulling in anything from 800 to 1,000 on there a couple of times a week. And I was doing me and Mitch one night, and I was doing me and the next player another night. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to try and migrate this over to YouTube. So I cleared the channel. I wish I hadn't done that now, because I lost all the views of the videos that I had on. But I cleared all the channel of copyrighted stuff, and I started putting my own content on there. And I asked a couple of people, John Owen from Jab, who's no longer with us, passed away earlier this year, and Neil Jackson from Media Arts to help us out. Neil does the videos, John was doing the flyers, and that's how NUFC Matters started. So NUFC Matters started properly on this channel in March and April 2020, and it's been going now for a couple of years. So yeah, that's when I started doing the Newcastle stuff. We did a couple of pilot episodes with me, Malcolm, and Gibbo. We started, me and Malcolm did a couple together, just on a laptop in the office in Newcastle. Probably averaged about 250 to 400 views. And then we did, me, Gibbo, and Malcolm professionally. We met at a house, and we got a proper film crew. But again, we just didn't get the numbers, so we knocked it on the head. So we probably did about 7 or 8 pilot episodes, but just never took off. People didn't like it. But then lockdown changed everything for the better for us, for the show, and it's never looked back. I think with true crime videos, I think we had something like 13 or 14,000 subscribers. So now, we're at 49,000. I don't think we'll grow past that. I think we're around about that. If we ever get to 50,000, I'll be over the moon, Paul. But I'm not really that fussed. And the fact that I'm moving the true crime stuff away, we'll probably lose subscribers, but I don't think that's a bad thing, because this really is going to be predominantly Newcastle, and the true crime channel is just going to have the true crime stuff on. It'll take time to build that, but anybody who's sitting here now and wants to watch the true crime stuff, just type in, the true crime channel and try. I think it's a bit difficult to find it, and I might have to rename it, but it's, the true crime channel is where you find it. John, if you're in the chat, and you can stick the link in, and people can go and subscribe. Can we all just take a moment to show our sympathy to Jurgen Klopp, says Andrew. Yeah, it's never been the same since he got them turkey teeth, mate. Doug Hall says, do you fancy dabbling into conspiracy theories, the Twin Towers, the moon landings and aliens and many others? Now that does interest us, Doug. I haven't looked at getting anybody on, but you know what? I would probably look at doing something like that, mate. Maybe that's something we'd put into the News of the World show for now, and maybe do one of those each week as a debate. It's a good shout, Doug. I'll jot that down and probably look at doing it. The Nielsen vid you did was excellent, Steve. Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, it was very interesting. The guy actually had Dennis Nielsen's ashes and hadn't got rid of them. He was waiting for the time that was right to do it. The guy was lovely, a great guy to speak to, but I've just felt, again, without wanting to be hypocritical, I wrote the two murderers. So, and I mentioned that in the podcast. But I was thinking the guys I wrote to were gangsters, and the people they killed were gangsters. It doesn't make it right because they killed somebody, and that's wrong, and I can't condone that. But Dennis Nielsen went out and killed 16, 17, maybe more innocent gay guys for his own sexual gratification. And I just felt, God, why would you even write to somebody like that, Bizarre. But yeah, thanks, mate. Thanks. Ryan says, Klopp and Liverpool deserve all the misery they get. I used to like Klopp when he first came to this country, but the 7-year itch is definitely starting to itch. It's more like a scratch now, isn't it? And this is apparently what happens every time he goes to a club. Hits 7 years, all goes Pete Tong. Rachel says, I just moved to West Yorkshire when the Ripper was on his reign of terror. We had CID come to see me dad because he'd been reported to the police for being a Geordie. Wow, Rachel, that's mental. I've heard one or two stories about that. People who had the coppers at the door. People who lived in Sunderland who obviously when the Iron Jack tape came out, people were interviewed and had, were at the door, etc. People saying, it sounds like such and such. But I've heard a few stories about that. John says, I remember living through the Yorkshire Ripper as well. Didn't help as a child when they caught him that the guy who lived over the road was a doppelganger. I was convinced he had escaped. Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? Long hair and moustaches, etc. There was a few people suspected, I think, John. What was wrong with VAR yesterday with Trippier? Seen it on Match of the Day. Tom, VAR, you never criticise VAR. It's doing really well for Newcastle at the moment. John, thank you. He says, remember to hit the likes. It does make a big difference, folks, if we hit the likes. I mean, there's 71 watching now, but if you all hit the likes, that would be great. And John has also posted the link to the True Crime channel in the chat. I've pinned it to the top. So if you can kindly stick a subscription on there, that will be great. I'm not going to do any live stuff on there until we hit 1,000. He's sticking with 4th, Andrew, 6th or 7th for Tom. And Jackie thinks we'll beat Man United 2-1. David says, from next Those Were the Days podcast, I have a lot of programs. If George might need them, I could send pictures and scans. David, might be worth you contacting George on Twitter. He might appreciate that. Give him a shout. Chris says, Kevin Keegan has in-depth knowledge of Newcastle as a player and a manager. Eddie was very wise to have a chat with King Kev. You're right. I think we're giving Manu the big 6 next week, says Andrew. Wow. Now that will be good. 4, 5, 6. My bet is top 4, £10 win, and I'm giving it to the food bank. That's very generous of you, Paul. Eddie faced 8 questions on press conference about Saudi. Eddie handled it well. David, you're right. Sick of people asking him them questions, but he bats them off very well indeed. Keith says, Steve, what's your thoughts on what's happened with Chris Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn and the Fury versus AJ fight? Got to be honest, as a former boxing promoter of 9 years, professional boxing promoter, very disappointed in that Eubank Benn thing. We can't cast too many judgments until the second test comes in. But if he fails that one as well, then that's a massive black mark on Ben. He may pass it though, and then it's a big farce, isn't it? It's a farce already, but if he passes, it's a bit of a farce. But until we get all the facts, we can't really talk too much about it. Ben and Eubank, let's wait and see. Fury versus AJ. Well, I mean, I just don't think AJ wants to fight him. And I think if Fury fights him now, he beats him. But ultimately, it's a fight I want to see, and I think a lot of boxing fans would love to see it. And I'd like to think it would be close and would get a second and a third, but I just think if Fury fights AJ, he puts AJ to sleep. I can't see him winning. I can't see AJ winning. Let's hope it gets sorted. Could a huge problem regarding Madison be our wage structure? Yes, John. In an answer, yes, it could be. That is up to Newcastle, though, to find a way around it. Cristiano Ronaldo looks like he's getting ready to come on. 26 minutes into the game, Everton 1, Man United 1. I noticed they referenced human rights in Saudi before the Newcastle highlights on Match of the Day. Typical BBC. They just won't leave it alone, says Chris. Yeah, I noticed that as well. Just one of hundreds of people doing that, mate. It was awful to see, again, it getting mentioned. And they never mentioned it with any of these other clubs. It was a very boisterous in the bar, and the PA system wasn't as good as the last time, but we will do better next time, says John, about the sound on the video. Sefton Mag says, good evening, Steve. Just on my way out for Wallace's birthday. I love reading your books and enjoyed them. Did you ever meet Jimmy Neal? Yes. Boss win yesterday. How are the lads? Keep up the great work. Yes, mate. I met him at a preview to a musical that I was invited to do, and I met him on the same night that I met Sting. And I've got to be honest, he's a very nice bloke. Got on very well with him. Good crack, and he's a big Toon fan. So he's a top man. Tom, I think we are going to Saudi during the World Cup, which is great. Earwax problem, Steve. Last week, Stu, you won't believe it, but on the final whistle yesterday, I'd wiggled my ear that much during the match. It finally cleared. So I stuck cotton buds in it again, and it's sorted. So thank you, Stuart. It's sorted. John, I hope you're well, mate. Keep up the good work. I see you're doing some great stuff as usual, mate. Anybody who hasn't seen the Humble Dryer stuff, very interesting. Get yourself onto his channel. Give him a sub. Do you remember the supporters club in Product Place? Booked bus for away matches. Yeah, David, I used to go there. I had a membership card. I remember Sadie and Les used to work in the shop. Absolutely fantastic place, mate. Many, many happy memories, and I spent all my pocket money in there. Have you finished Dharma yet? I finished it on Thursday, Tom, and I did enjoy it. It was great. What a happy ending, Tom. Other media overblown. Haaland, we all know having a goal scorer in City team is much easier than most teams in the world. Good question. No, they're not. He is a robot. Ronaldo's just coming on 28 minutes into the game. No, he's a robot, mate. He's a monster. But he's just doing what he gets paid for, and he's doing it well. Nunez has had a slow start, but he scored today. It's Martial who's gone off injured for Man U, by the way. But yeah, look, I think Haaland's getting the praise he deserves, mate. But he's got to do it over the 38 games, hasn't he? So let's see where we're at. I think his career in the Premier League will be short-lived, and I think he will win the Champions League with Man City, and I think he'll be off to Real Madrid. Godfather 2 is pure class, mate. Do you think it's a bad loan move for Dubravka? Yes, Tom, 100%. Once Upon a Time in America is a good film, Andrew. Yeah, I do like that as well. Chris says he was in a bar near Wembley before the 1990 FA Cup final and suddenly realised the bloke next to me waiting to be served with Supermac. I nearly dropped my pint. I bet you did. Once Upon a Time is fantastic. Dave says, I hear you, Steve, but I'm still confident you can owe me a pint when we're D. Hey, top 4, mate, and I'll happily buy you a pint if you're right. The Hurricane, Denzel Washington, is a great film. Good song by Bob Dylan as well. What's your thoughts on Ben Eubank? Already done that. The press conference was embarrassing that Eddie Hearn had to do as well. Back to the Future trilogy. Watched it recently, Rachel, with the Bens, and they loved it. Once Upon a Time in the West, not America, Andrew. No, Once Upon a Time in America was the gangster film with De Niro. It's excellent. It's certainly a refreshing change, Ryan. You're not wrong. Clearly miles away with the chat. Let's see just before I finish off. Right, here we go. How did you meet Paul Ferris, the Glaswegian, not the physio? Gary, I met him through a photographer called Brian Anderson. He was kind enough to give us an intro, and ultimately that guy is a very, very deep thinker, very, very intelligent guy. Again, a criminal, an ex-criminal. But he was kind enough to allow us to do a book with him, and I'm pleased I did. I'm really pleased that he gave me the opportunity to do that. Unfinished Business by Paul Ferris and Steve Wraith is available on the it's on the website, which you can see www.badboysbooks.co.uk, badboysbooks.net. Been listening since day one. Says Andrew, thank you very much, mate. And Tom says he's been listening since the first lockdown. Question, is YouTube a good earner? No, it isn't, mate. But if you can get sponsorship, you can make some money off it. There's expenses, because to do 7 shows a week, I have to have an external partner to broadcast it. But no, you need to have other work, mate. If you're the true Geordie or Sean Atwood or James English, yes, you make good money. But it's peanuts, really, mate, in the grand scheme of things. I think the best thing to come from NUFC matters is the community. It's a care and quality community filled with people who love what we all do. Newcastle United, very true, Ryan. Which is why I made the conscious effort to remove the true crime stuff in December and go full on with the Newcastle stuff on here. Chris says it's great to have local guys make an intelligent, well-informed comment all things Newcastle. Thanks for all you do. Thank you very much, mate. Much appreciated. And don't forget the True Crime channel. You can sub to it. It's pinned at the top. Please do it if you haven't already. Neil says the Gypsy King. Neil even talks about his drugs ban. Yeah, look, he turned things around, Neil. But that's a really good point. It is a good point. Yeah. And so what I would say to that is, if Conor Benn gets found guilty, then there's a way back, and there's been ways back for other people, mate, 100%. But that's a really good point, Neil. I'd rather see the undisputed fight with Usyk again, Andrew. I think it'll happen, that one. I do think that one will happen. Clarissa versus Savannah. It's going to be a banger, 100%. Did you see Wilson's podcast regarding Haaland and how he wants a silver boot for everyone else to compete for? I didn't see that, but I saw the quote. I thought it was very funny. Mate, did the craze ever make you feel uneasy? William, yes. When Ronnie said that he wanted us to get rid of Kate. Now that could be taken in one of two ways. That made us feel a bit uneasy. And also the day that Ronnie lost his temper with the Ripper, who knocked my chair. Again, not the most easiest of things to cope with when a murderer sitting in front of you going slag and getting red in the face. Reg, no, he never made us feel uneasy. He just tried to manipulate me once over a charity event, which has been well documented, and the phone call was recorded. But they never made us feel uneasy, William. Not at all. And the visits were always, in rooms where there was guards and other visitors. So no, not at all. McVicker is one of the best movies. Great one. Great soundtrack. I've got that soundtrack on my music as well. Yeah. Once Upon a Time in the West was Dire Straits, says Neil. Rachel, thank you for all your work as usual, asking people to subscribe. Don't forget, hit the bell. Yeah, hit the bell and click when the drop down menu comes down. Put all notifications, and it means every time we do a show live, you'll get a notification. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is a good film, Derek. And Tom says, great show tonight. As always, that hour flies over. But I have to love you and leave you. Thanks for all your questions. Thanks for everything. All the nice comments. And enjoy the rest of your week. And I'll do another one of these very soon. Take care. Good night. Have a good night.